Borkmann's Point by Håkan Nesser. Translated by Laurie Thompson. And read by David Timson. But, of course, necessity can never be a reason, nor an excuse, only a cause. C.W. Wundermass, former Detective Chief Inspector. 1. 31st of August to the 10th of September. Chapter 1. Had Ernst Zimmel known he was to be the Axeman's second victim, he would no doubt have downed a few more drinks at the Blue Ship. As it was, he settled for a brandy with his coffee and a whisky on the rocks in the bar, while trying unsuccessfully to make eye contact with the bleached blonde woman in the far corner. But anyway, his heart wasn't in it. Presumably she was one of the new employees at the canning factory. He'd never seen her before, and he had a fair idea about the available talent. To his right was Hermann Scholke, a reporter on De Journal, trying to interest him in a cheap weekend trip to Kaliningrad or somewhere of the sort, and when they eventually got around to pinning down his last evening, it seemed probable that Scholke must have been the last person in this life to speak to Zimmel. Always assuming that the Axeman didn't have some message to impart before finishing him off, that is, which wasn't all that likely, since the blow, as in the previous case, had come diagonally from behind and from slightly below, so a little chat seemed improbable. "Ah, well," Zimmel had said, after draining the last drops from his glass, "I'd better be getting back to the old lady." If Scholke remembered rightly, that is. In any case, he tried to talk him out of it, pointed out that it was barely 11, and the night was yet young. But Zimmel had been adamant. That was the right word. Adamant. Just eased himself off his bar stool, adjusted his glasses, and stroked that pathetic wisp of hair over his bald head, like he always did, as if that would fool anybody, muttered a few words, then left. The last Scholke had seen of him was the white outline of his back as he paused in the doorway and seemed to be hesitating about which direction to take. Looking back, that was distinctly odd. For Christ's sake, surely Zimmel knew his way home. But maybe he just stood there for a few seconds to fill his lungs with the fresh night air. It had been a hot day. Summer was not over yet, and the evenings had started to exude a mellowness enriched by many months of summer sun. Enriched and refined. As if made for drinking in deep draughts, somebody had said, these nights. In fact, it wasn't a bad night for a journey to the other side, if one might be allowed such a thought. Scholke's section of De Journal was mainly concerned with matters sporting and a dash of folklore, but in his capacity as the last person to have seen Zimmel alive, he had presumed to write an obituary of the property developer who had been so suddenly plucked from our midst. A pillar of our society, one might say, who had just returned to his native town after a sojourn of several years abroad, on the Costa del Sol, along with other like-minded citizens with a bent for effective tax planning, but perhaps this was not the occasion to refer to that. Survived by a wife and 2 grown-up children, having reached the age of 50, but still in the prime of his life, no doubt about that. The scent of evening seemed full of promise. He paused in the doorway, hesitating. Would it be a good idea to take a stroll over to Fisherman's Square and down by the harbour? What was the point of going home as early as this? The sweetish smell of the bedroom and Greta's overweight body shot through his mind, and he decided to take a little walk, only a short one. Even if there was nothing to pick up, the warm night air would make it worth the effort. He crossed over Langway and turned off towards Bungeskirk. At the same time, the murderer emerged from the shadows under the lime trees in Leisner Park and started following him. Quietly and carefully, a safe distance behind, not a sound from his rubber soles. Tonight was his 3rd attempt, but even so there was no trace of impatience. He knew what he had to do, and the last thing on his mind was to rush things.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?